Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Sorry it took a while to make another video, but anyway, this video I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do some explaining of my console, my mixer, some tips, tricks, if you might have this mixer. It's the Studio Live 3. My particular one is the 32S. There's a couple different variants in there. There's a 24 and there's a 64. There's a slim form factor. Basically, they're all the same, just the only major difference is number of inputs available and a little bit of form factor. But as far as running and using all the consoles, all the same techniques apply. So no matter which Series 3 mixer you have, these tips and tricks will work. Real quick though, but before we get into that, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you know when there's videos comes up. On top of that, the benefit to you is I'm going to be giving away hardware in the near future, but we need to build up that audience a little bit. So make sure you subscribe because I want to be able to give away some different equipment and gear. We're probably going to start off with some like interfaces or microphones, or probably an interface, probably the most common thing that people need when they're starting off. And we'll go from there. So let's get into some tips and tricks. Okay, first let's talk about, I guess, the number one thing that pops up right away when people get this mixer or a variant of it is how to get audio out from your DAW into the console for mixing, because most people that have this console are also using it as their audio interface. As there isn't an obvious way when you first get it set up that your main outputs from Studio One, which most people who have this console and that are using it in the studio environment are going to be using Studio One, but this console will work with other DAWs as well, obviously. But the main thing when coming out of the DAW is setting out which output to send its stuff to. So you have to think about it actually it's not coming out outputs. You're going into the console to play out. It's kind of like if you're used to like other audio interfaces, say like a Scarlett, like a Focusrite, or a many of the rack mountable, maybe a couple channels, whether it's 2 or 8 or 16 or whatever your rack mountable interface is, you'll have outputs and you'll be able to assign those direct out. Well, console works a little bit differently. You have to think about it slightly differently. So you have to send the audio into an input somewhere in the console, and then you can send it out your main outputs for monitoring. And actually I'll talk about monitoring stuff later in the video, but the most common, you can technically send those inputs to any input source. So it could be 1, 2 on the mixing console, channels 1, 2. Most commonly used and most kind of default way to do it out of Studio One is to use the tape input, but you're going to use the digital version. So I'll show you this real quick. Okay, here's the console and how it's set up. Ignore the iPad for now, but that actually interfaces as well through Wi-Fi. Anyway, so as you can see, you have this is a 32S, has 32 channels of inputs. This has you have 32 inputs on the back coming in. And then you also have auxiliary, effects returns, auxiliaries 1, 2, tape in, and a talk back as well. The 64S version is just like this, but layers to the next 32 channels, and then these after that. Though the 64S doesn't have 64 analog inputs, you actually do need to purchase stage boxes and run Ethernet into the AVB port. You can also use the AV bridge on this and the other Studio Live mixers, so it allows more flexibility and routing and things of that nature. We'll get into that later. So to get the audio in from the DAW from Studio One, it's most commonly routed to the tape input. Most people don't realize that. I didn't realize it. It took me a little while to figure that out. So you'll need to bring that input up, push next over on there, get to your tape input, wherever that might be in your particular console. And I have mine up here, so that's the input coming in. If I select that, you get this fat channel. If you've researched any of the Presonus mixers, they've, over the last few generations, maybe all of them actually, they have, or at least the most modern ones, they have what's called a fat channel. This has kind of been tweaked and changed over the generations of mixers. This is how the fat channel looks on the new Studio Live 3 consoles. This is where I select whatever channel I want to. So if you can see here and watch this analog and USB, if I select different channels, it's all analog. If I select the tape channel, it goes to USB. So you need to have that set to USB, because you're going to have obviously the mixer connected to your computer via USB cable. This is where you'll get the input from that. But that's not all you have to do. There's a little bit more. But you also have to route it and tell it where to send that. Okay? So if you click on the home button here, you click on audio routing, then digital patching. This is also, by the way, the newest firmware update. So some of the older firmwares, the screen layout looks slightly different. So you're going to want to make sure that you're up to date on your firmware before you really do anything anyway. So do that. In here, you can see all the inputs and available sources for those. You have assignable sources. So channel 1 is the analog input, which looks like a little XLR input. And so if I go back to channel 1, the mic here, it's analog. Oops, let's go back there, sorry. But you notice channel 2 is USB. So a route like a channel 2 input, I can route from the DAW. And you can select which channels you want to send that to. Normally I have it on analog, but I was doing something and I was sending something through. Anyway, to get to the tape input. Oops, why do I keep doing that? So your inputs here, this rotary knob can turn up and down these to all your different inputs here. You have your analog sends, AVB sends, USB sends, SD card, AES. Right now we're just worried about the inputs, keeping it simple. There's a lot of stuff in here. But if you scroll down past all your inputs, however many you have, past your aux, on this particular console, I have it selected to USB, which if I changed it, should switch there. Yep. So you can either do it here or here. You can actually do it either way. It doesn't matter. And then available sources. So after you've selected USB, you want to click on available sources and use the rotary to select the appropriate available sources. So left would be 37, right would be 38. Now, that being said, you also need to go into Studio One or your DAW and change your matrix. Now let me show you how to do that. So you want to pull up your options. A quick way to do that actually on Studio One is to pull up the console, which is over here. I have it on a second screen, but we'll pull it over here real quick so you can kind of see what I'm doing. There's a couple ways to get into here, but this is the easiest way I find, is to go into the console, click on the I/O button here, and this will pull up your I/O options. It might pull up to this, but if you're on the options section, just go to audio. Let's see, go to song setup, and it'll be here. There's more information here in song setup, but the audio in-out setup. So for my mains right here, as you can see, I have the main output of Studio One routing to 3738 over here. and then outputs 1 through 16 are going to channels 1 through 16 on the board, so on and so forth. And then I also have stereo pairs of the same variety down here, all appropriately labeled. It's always good to label your things to make sense. I see some people label them to like instruments or like more specific, like people will redo this for each song. I don't like to work that way personally. I like to have it kind of just set and forget, and I use the combination of a patch bay and the routing on the board and the routing in there, and I just pay attention to what I'm doing. And if it gets too complicated, I guess I could write things down. But I like just to keep it simple and not change it all the time, because it's just one less thing I have to worry about, and it becomes a nightmare. So anyway, the point is mains 37 and 38. I'm assuming you assign them here, but they're the most common because they follow after the 30 on this board, because there's 32 inputs plus the auxiliaries. What follows is 37, 38, so that's the most commonly used on the 32S. It would probably be different per console, you know, different models of console. You can technically use any inputs you want, so you're not limited to those. You can assign them to whatever. I just keep them there because that seems to be the most common / simplest way to track it down. If I forget, I can just count them out. So 37, 38 is what I suggest, but you can do what you like. Okay, the next tip or trick or whatever is headphone monitoring on this console. You have complete flexibility to monitor from the headphone jacks. You have a headphone jack right here on the front, which is great for, so let me kind of step back real quick. This mixing console is great for live and studio. Has a lot of flexibility for both, and really shines in both, just they're used differently. Beyond that, there's a lot of cool features when it comes to using the headphone system on this. As far as, I personally don't really use them in my studio, in my workflow, and that's just, but I see if I was recording live bands, doing like more bands type of stuff where lots of artists are doing things simultaneously, or just even like a couple, you know, there's a lot of features that could be very useful for that in this. Let me show you some of the headphone options for monitoring. I come out the main outputs personally and go through the main outputs and go through the Presonus monitoring station V2, I believe it's called, which is just a monitoring setup for studio use. So it allows me to switch inputs and outputs so I can listen to things on different speaker sets, different sets of headphones, all right from one box. And so I don't use the headphone monitoring options on the console itself, though they are great, and you don't need to go out to a separate thing. It's just I prefer lots of different sources and stuff. So it's just a preference. And as you grow, you may want to do the same, but you don't need to. So what we need to do is where it says this monitoring section here, we just click on edit. And this is where we can select what our headphones and monitoring, like there's also monitoring outputs on there, that we can listen to, right? So on the headphones right now it's set to main. We can set it to a solo. So if we solo something, any one of the channels, you know, or multiples probably. I haven't tried it. Nope. Okay. Can't do that. I was thinking maybe you could probably select multiples, but it doesn't let you. You know. Anyway, so you select which channel and you have the solo, and that comes out your headphones. Your volume for your headphones is right here, and this is your monitor volume. So if you have your connected to your speakers hooked up directly to this can control your main monitor volume, or you can have them set to your master output. Use this depending on, it doesn't really matter, it's up to you. Probably the correct way is to use this for your monitoring if you're going to go that route. I just send my main out to my monitoring station over here, and then that's where I control the volumes. because I'm mixing down in DAW anyway. But so you have the solo, you have a tape where you can listen to the tape, obviously, through the headphones. This isn't, I don't think, that useful in a studio environment if you're using the tape input as your input, obviously. Then you also have mixes. You can select any of the mixes. So when you send stuff out, your outputs, any of the 16 outputs, which are also called mixes, it's kind of labeled weird. But over here along this side, you see 16 channels here, or 16. These are basically 1 through 16 of your outputs on the back of the console. So this is where you can, like, so mix 1, if you have that 1 output, you could send, so that with that selected, it allows you to send any of the inputs to, so whatever those levels are is what's going out, and effects that you have and everything else is going out the mix 1. Now if I click mix 2, the second output, it's not getting all those other things, and you can have a different mix for that, right? And then, so it has different mixes. Anyway, so back to this. So this allows you to listen to each one of those mixes individually as well. Again, I don't use them, but these kind of things are great for live use. Really great for live use. Or if you're in a studio environment where you're recording bands, maybe you have a drummer, a guitarist, a singer, and they're in different rooms, or maybe in the same room, but they have their own headphone mixes. You could send headphone mixes out each one of the outputs of this and tailor their mix. They can actually even use their own, like, phones or iPads to connect to this thing wirelessly and set up their own mixes through their device and not affect other people's mixes. That is an option as well. I'm not going to get into how to set that up, but you can do it. Another really cool feature for this mixer is you can actually set up a user bank, meaning you can, if you have a complex set of mix, you can tailor what you need, you know, the handful of things that you're mixing. This is more tailored towards live use or tracking, I suppose. But you can set up your channels individually, so it doesn't have to be 1 through 32. You can just use a handful of them in a certain section. Like I said, it's great for live if you have a complex set, or if you have, you're tracking, that kind of thing. Let me show you how to set that up real quick. Okay, so at the console here, we're on the normal thing. We're not in DAW mode or anything. We're just in regular mode here. So I can go to user. So there's inputs here that's already selected. So it's showing all the inputs. You can go to user. Now nothing is shown here, right? Now if I select something, so up here in the top corner, I don't know if you can see it, but it shows what channel you have selected. And then you can select whatever you want there. So say I want my ModiX left there and my ModiX right here. Or actually, well, better yet, let's take that off real quick. Let's say I want my MX49L, which is another Yamaha mixer. I want that on channel 2, which I have selected, right? Now I hit done. So now when I have this move ModiX 11 or move ModiX up, if I go back to inputs here, notice how the ModiX, because they're a stereo pair, I have them selected as a stereo pair, they're linked. They moved up, right? Both of them. Now let's go back to user, and let's move that down there. Go back to inputs. Notice how they're down here now, where it was in conjunction under the user layer. Same thing, for the other one. Let's go back to that, and let's change this. And boom! Now you see the, and they're in different order too, so you can order them in any way you want to. So this is great for if you don't want to worry about stereo pairs, which is fine, but maybe in a live situation, or maybe you're tracking that just kind of bothers you or whatever, or just you're grabbing faders and you don't want to grab them weirdly, sometimes when you move two, they don't want to move like perfectly together, just because there's a delay and it goes, so it gets kind of annoying, I guess, to some people. It doesn't bother me, but I could see how it could. So under here in the user section, you don't have to worry about that. They're already linked on your inputs. So this allows you to just have what you need without all the inputs, especially if you have, you know, a whole bunch, you know. I believe this also works in DAW mode as well. Let me check. I haven't tried. So if we're in DAW mode here, maybe user, I don't think so, actually. Now that I look at it, like this. No, these are just showing the inputs for. Yeah, these are just showing all the inputs for each of the channels when you go over to user mode and DAW mode. So it's not the same thing. Anyway, come back to here. Your inputs, user mode, customize that however you want. I find it would be personally more useful on the 64 one, where like if you're running 64 channels, or if you're, I think there's the 32 one that has, it's more compact. That would be useful too. On this console specifically, I don't find it super useful just because you have all 32 faders right there. Like, it doesn't make a ton of sense in this specific console under the conditions, especially the conditions I run. But that's there in case you need it. Okay, the last tip or thought or trick or whatever is monitoring, real-time monitoring of your mixes, or of tracking, I suppose. So you can either monitor directly from the console, or you can monitor directly from Studio One. So this is kind of like a Studio One / Studio Live mixer thing. And I think most people that are using this console are probably going to at least use Studio One some of the time, if not most of the time, or all of the time. So you have an option to monitor real time in either or. Sometime, if you don't have like a super powerful computer, it may benefit you to monitor on the console more often. But if you have plugins that you want to be able to monitor in real time with, you need to do that through Studio One. So depending on how intensive those plugins are and how many there are, how powerful your computer is, will kind of determine the latency and viability of doing such a thing. With the console, so if you say you have a more minimal computer, it's not a super beast like I'm running, then you can, you know, use the console and the effects in it to monitor. Quick, so something to note, when you are recording something into Studio One and you're using this console as your main interface to do so, the audio that it's taking is going to be pre-fader. So the fader control isn't going to determine the fader level of any of your, you know, inputs here isn't going to determine the record level. Your preamp level and any, you know, compression / EQ, gate, anything of that type of nature, or effects that you have going on, it will use that if it's pre-fader. If you have effects set and post-fader on this, then it won't. So that's something to keep in mind. But basically, your input from your preamp and the fat channel is what's being recorded into the DAW. The fader level, as far as tracking goes, will come out your main master, and for me, that goes out to my monitoring, and that is just monitoring. It's not affecting the record level. Now, say you don't want that, you can turn down the fader, and you just want, like, say you're tracking a mic through channel 1 or whatever. You set up your levels, it sounds good, but you want to process, you want to hear vocals. The artist wants to hear vocals that are being processed maybe by some reverb or delay or whatever, right? Just turn down the fader, and on the channel for whatever track it is. So let's move my mouse over here. So let's say this is the channel, right? And I have a thing coming through here. Now, when I select record, usually, most of the time, when you hit record on the channel to record, it'll also have the button next to it is your monitor, and it'll normally actively come on every time you like select a channel in general. That monitoring behavior will automatically come on. I don't like that. I want to be able to manually select it because I don't want like it became annoying to me. It was accidentally turning things like I didn't want it on. So the way to turn it on and off is go back to your options. Let's see, options, console. Let's see. So, okay, so in the options here, there's a couple of things. Audio input follows selection. I have that off because I want more manual control. But audio track monitoring follows record. So that I turn off. You can turn it on or off depending on how you like to work. There's a few options in here that are, I would say, kind of experiment with. Audio track monitoring, mutes playback. These, like right now I have all four of the bottom ones here turned off because I just don't like them on. But everybody has a different thing. So to kind of turn that one on and off automatically, that option's there. I think it's by default, it's on. I find it annoying personally, so I turn it on when I want to use that, because often I'll just use the console to monitor, but each their own. So you would just click the little monitoring button next to the record button. Oops, let me cancel this. And then at that point, everything that's being if the input on this case is input 1, which is here. I already have it selected on this, and you have a stereo and mono option here as well, so you got to pay attention to which of those you have as well, because some things work in stereo and some things don't, so pay attention to that as well. Obviously a mic is a mono source unless you're dual miking or using a stereo specific mic. Anyway, so that's how you set up monitoring in the DAW. It's a little blue icon next to the record button on the channel. So I don't know if you can see it very well in there, but every channel on here has mute, solo, record, and monitoring buttons. So if you're recording stuff or you just want to monitor like some soft synths, you have to turn that on to hear the software synthesizer as you're playing a MIDI keyboard or something to it. You have to turn the monitoring on that soft synth to hear it, otherwise you can't hear it. So that's an important distinction between monitoring on here and monitoring on there. Another quick thing, let me move the camera. Another quick just tidbit, you can set up shortcuts for actions within the console, and then also for when you're in DAW mode. I don't use any of the shortcuts really when I'm tracking. I haven't found a specific need, so I just have some that are set up for the DAW on here. Now if you go to home, the way you get to that real quick is you go to system, I think, yeah, so system, user buttons, so it's DAW user buttons. If I take it off DAW mode, it'll go back in. So these are the user buttons in non-DAW mode. They're just set up on mute groups. So if you have like mute groups 1 through 8, that's what they're defaulted as. So if you have a mute group and you want to mute multiple things simultaneously, you can just use those buttons to mute those. You can assign them to do other things too. Like let's click edit. You have tap tempo, you can load scenes, scene navigation, and mute groups. That's basically it. So mostly I think they're mostly designed for mute groups, but I find them much more useful inside of in DAW mode. So like I have save, auto detect transients, toggle mute, bounce selection, strip silence, like just whatever I use more often. Another quick tip is I also use a Stream Deck here. I can load it up. So use one of these as well for even more shortcuts. Probably end up getting another one. Okay, thanks for watching. I really appreciate you sticking around. I feel like I may have rambled on a little bit, but anyway, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. I'd appreciate it. Maybe share this video or the channel with maybe somebody who's into music production. I'm more than happy to take questions and see if I can answer them when it comes to music production. I've been doing this for 20 years now, so I feel like I might have to be able to help some people. Anyway, make sure you subscribe. Like I said before, at the beginning of the video, I will be doing some giveaways, but I need to have more subscribers before I can legitimately do that. But I will be, out of my own pocket, giving away equipment on a semi-regular basis. But we gotta get those subscribers up. So please do me a favor, and do yourself a favor if you want some free gear, right? Like, I'm gonna just be giving stuff away. So maybe it's you or your buddy who gets some free gear. Either way, hit that subscribe, hit that like button, hit that notification, because that really makes a big difference as well. And watch these videos, share these videos, and please leave a comment below if there's something that you want me to cover, whether it's more about this console, whether it's more about Studio One, whether it's more about anything, tracking, where you want to see more beat making videos, which I'm going to definitely do. Have a buddy coming over, going to be tracking some vocals at some point. I'm not sure exactly when, but soon-ish, to a song that we've been working on for another artist. And so it's kind of like a work in progress at the moment. But he's going to be coming over. I probably am going to record him tracking and put together something regarding that song as well. Anyway, so please subscribe. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. Have a good one. Peace.